Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the vlog. I am currently reporting from somewhere in the Mojave Desert. I'm on my way from California to Las Vegas. It's a beautiful day for a long drive, and I thought I'd pull over here to fly the drone, as you guys saw, and also intro the video as to what's going on today. So, I am headed to Vegas to play a high-stakes game at the Wynn. I think it's 2040. Straddles will likely be on, and it's a game hosted by a good buddy of mine named Boston Jimmy. He has games here like every weekend, and I was fortunate enough to be given a seat for this Sunday's game. Before we get into the game, however, I wanted to remind you all that this Friday, December 6th, my band Dear Delta is coming out with new music. It's a song called Breathe. It looks like this. Now, my band isn't really doing this for the money. It's more of a passion project, and even if we were doing it for the money, let's face it, there's like no money in making music nowadays, or hardly any, I should say, which leads me to my next point. I'm taking this band as an opportunity to give some back to the community. A lot of you guys have supported me along my journey on YouTube. So what we're gonna do is every time we release like merch or new music or whatever, I'm gonna be giving some cash away. For Breathe, we're coming out with a music video along with the song on Friday, December 6th. Anyone who comments on that music video will be eligible to win $500. I'm gonna pick a random winner from the comments section. So that's the plan for this Friday. I think I actually have another poker vlog coming out on that day as well, so more details to come. That's enough gibberish. If you guys like music, check that out. If you don't, and you just wanna see some poker, you're in luck, because we're headed to the casino right now. I'll see you guys there.
Alright guys, here we are at the Wynn. Welcome news when I arrive is that the game is actually 25-50-100. I thought it was like a 20-40 game, but instead it's quite bigger, similar to what I play at Hustler normally. So that's nice. I sit down with around $40,000, and in the first interesting hand, I look down at Queen 10 of clubs from under the gun. I make it 300 to go and get called by a player in middle position and the big blind. Three of us go into a flop of King 10 deuce with two spades out there. Big blind checks, and already we have a decision here. I think betting is okay, but since we're three ways and not even last to act, I'm not a huge fan of betting middle pair, so I decide to check it. Then the player behind me bets $300. Big blind folds, and of course I can't go anywhere just yet, so I make the call, and we see a very nice turn card. It's the 10 of diamonds, giving me three of a kind, also introducing a second flush draw. I check it to him since he bet the flop. I'm obviously hoping he bets again, but instead he checks it back, so we're off to a river, which is the 8 of clubs. Shouldn't really change anything, and it looks like I'm gonna have to do my own betting here. It would be a disaster to try to trap, and then he just checks back. Question is, how big do we want to bet? And I think an overbet is in order here, mainly because I'm either representing a super strong hand or some sort of bluff. When that's the case, I like a bigger size, so I decide $3,200 is the way to go, about double the pot size, hoping to put him in a tough spot with any king that he might have pot controlled the turn with. Sure enough, it looks like that's what he's got, because he thinks about it for quite some time before eventually calling. That's good news, and sure enough, Queen 10 of clubs is the winning hand. My opponent would tell me later on that he actually had King 8 of spades for top pair and a flush draw on the flop. Needless to say, we got pretty lucky there, but it's a good start to the session. In the next hand, the stand-up game is on, and just gonna pause here for a second to show you guys how beautiful are these stand-up game buttons. Knit game, sometimes it's called that depending where you're playing. It looks like they call it the knit game here. But anyway, I look down at 4 deuce of clubs. There's a $400 double straddle on, and you're probably wondering, why is this hand in the video? Well, that's because I made it $1,200 to go. Of course, this is just a terrible hand, and you should probably never do this, but I am playing in a game where most of the players here are just here for a good time, and I want to be able to give some action back to these guys. So here I am with 4 high, making it $1,200 to go. There is the added incentive of the stand-up game, of course, but this is just a little too far. Anyway, only the double straddler calls, and we go to a flop of 995 with 1 club. He checks, and of course, I'm gonna miss this board fairly often, but so is he, right? So I decided to bet $800. Would also do this with strong hands. Luckily, my opponent just folds, and we show 4 high to win our bounty button. Not the most action ever, but I did want to show how I got rid of my knit button here. Anyway, in the next hand, the double straddle is on, and I look down at a much better hand, ace-7 of clubs. Now, if I'm going to be raising 4 deuce of clubs, ace-7 certainly qualifies. I make it 500 to go. Big blind makes the call, and then the double straddler decides to raise. He makes it $2,200 to go. Back to me, and of course, getting a good price with a playable hand. We're not going anywhere. It's just a question of raising or calling in position. I think calling is more standard. Occasionally getting frisky with a re-raise is probably not the worst thing ever, but this time I just keep it chill and make the call. Big blind folds, so we go heads up in position to a flop, which is above average. You could say it's 8-5-3 all clubs. That's right, we flop the stone cold nuts in a re-raised pot in position, stuff that dreams are made of. He bets $1,400. I, of course, I'm not going to raise. I think if we were super deep, maybe you could consider it, but he's only got like $10,000 or $15,000 behind, so no need to get too aggressive just yet. I make the call, and we see a beautiful turn card. It's the Jack of Hearts. Shouldn't change anything at all, and it's not a scare card if he does have a strong hand. It looks like he's okay with it too, because he continues betting, this time $2,600. Now, I guess you could raise, because even though we have pretty much an unbeatable hand, there are so many river cards that could slow down the action. You know, another jack, another club, maybe just a board pair. I don't know. I feel like raising here would be understandable, but I decide to gamble a little that the river will be clean as well and just make the call again. Really can't go wrong here with either option, I think. River, sure enough, is beautiful as well. The 6 of hearts, could not have asked for a better run out. And even better news is that my opponent does not slow down. He now bets $4,000. Of course, we are going to be raising, and since he only has like $6,000 or $7,000 behind, the only appropriate size is all in. My opponent, after I do this, snap calls. So that, of course, is good news, and sure enough, we are winning this pot versus pocket kings. We get a little bit lucky here. Unfortunately for him, that kings are cracked. Nearly 35,000 getting pushed our way. Of course, this is a very good start to the session, but you know what could make it even better? Pocket aces. In this next one, I am in the double straddle with 2 red aces. There's an early position raised to 600. Player from last hand with the kings once again puts in the re-raise pre-flop. He makes it 2,200. It's on me now, and facing all this action, I think a trap is, interesting idea, but for the most part, keeping it standard with aces pre-flop is the route I usually advocate for. So that's what I'm going to go with here. I make it 8,000 to go. Early position raiser folds, but the big blind decides he's had enough. He's all in for around $12,000. Of course, I call, and just like that, we have a nearly $25,000 pot, all in pre-flop. My opponent asked to run it twice. I am usually just happy to let whoever I'm playing with choose how many times we run it. So we go off to 2 boards. First flop comes queen high, and he immediately turns over pocket queens. So we're probably not going to be winning this pot unless we find an ace on either the first turn or river. That's not the case, so now we are just trying to hang on in the second board. And we do. So we don't win the pot, but I guess it's always better than losing. And there is a little bit of dead money in there that we chop up, so silver lining, you could say. In the next one, the straddle is on. There's an early position raised to $500, and I am next to act with 10-3 suited. Of course, these cards should just be returned to the dealer, but instead, I make it $1,500 to go. If you guys are playing like 1-3, 2-5, 5-10, probably any game that's not private, this is just terrible. Absolutely do not do this. But like I said earlier, I'm in a game where I'm trying to give some action, and I've been winning a bunch of pots, getting dealt a bunch of good cards, perhaps feeling slightly guilty about it. So I decide to get in there with the 10-3 suited. Unfortunately, the small blind and big blind make the cold call, and then the initial raiser calls as well. This is a prime example of why it's just an awful idea to play hands like these in a game where people are giving a lot of action. You're just going to get multi-way spots with junk, and that's never fun. But anyway, the 4 of us go to a board of Jack 4-3, 2 hearts, 1 spade. Small blind decides he's just leading all in for a little less than $2,000, a short stack in this game. Other two players fold and it's on me. I've got bottom pair, we're getting a really good price, and I guess that's all the excuse I need. I make the call hoping we're up against a draw, or maybe we have the best hand somehow. And sure enough, that's what it seems like, because my opponent says I'm on a draw. That to me sounds like a 3 is good, so we're looking for a clean run out. Jack of clubs is the turn, that looks safe to me. River, different story. It's the 6 of hearts, so we're now losing to 6-5. We're losing to any flush draw. And yeah, we get the bad news right away. He turns over ace deuce of hearts for a huge flop. He's got a straight draw and a flush draw. I think mathematically he's probably ahead on the flop, even though a 3 is technically the stronger hand. Anyway, we lose this nearly $10,000 pot with 10-3 suited for apparently no reason. Moving right along, in the next hand there's an early position limp. I make it 500 on the button with 9-7 suited. Diamond variety this time. Big blind and limper make the call, so we go 3 ways to a flop of king, king, 4 with 1 diamond. They check it to me, and I think betting here is totally fine, but this time I decide to check it back, and we see another 4 on the turn, the 4 of clubs. Big blind now leads out for $900. Rather quickly and aggressively, I guess, or at least that's what it seemed like to me. So after the limper folds, I start to get a weird idea in my head that maybe he's just trying to steal this pot. He could have a flush draw, he could just have like queen high or jack high, he could have ace high, all sorts of stuff that would just be leading out here that isn't necessarily a full house, right? I mean, you can't just assign your opponent a full house every time they bet on a double paired board. That being said, even if I'm right, I only have 9 high, which doesn't even beat most bluffs. So my solution to all this is this plan that I derived right on the spot. Not sure if it's a good one, but I figured I would call the turn bet here, essentially just a hopeless float, and then try to win it on the river somehow, either by improving to a 9 or a 7, or most likely betting myself, or even raising if he decides to continue what I think is this bluffing story he's trying to tell. So anyway, I'm in there with the call, $900, 9 high. Not my best play ever, but those were my thoughts real time. River comes the queen of clubs, and now he bets out $2,100, continuing to sell this story that he's got something. Well, I didn't call the turn just to give up on this river. I am going to go for the old hero bluff raise type thing. I'm not even sure if that's real, but it's on display here. I make it $6,100. Now, obviously the reason I'm raising is I think he doesn't have much. If I had ace high or maybe even jack high, I would contemplate a call, but since my hand is so weak, we have to re-bluff the bluff, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm going for it here. I make it $6,100, and now my opponent thinks about it for quite some time, which was surprising to me. I figured if he had a full house, he would just snap call, and if he was bluffing, he would snap fold. Perhaps he's trying to save face. I'm not really sure what's going on, but in the end, he does end up folding. That, of course, is good news to me. I guess I should have said that I was playing the board on the river, right? Since it's kings and fours with a queen kicker. So I guess if he'd called, we probably would have chopped it. But anyway, we win this pot with pretty much nothing. In the next interesting hand, there's a middle position raise to 500, and I am in late position with 9-7 suited. Now this hand, in my opinion, isn't really strong enough to call when you don't even have ultimate last position. Plenty of players left to act behind me, so I think the best course of action is to fold or once in a while re-raise and try to get it heads up. So that's what I do this time. I make it $1,600 to go. Gets back around to the initial raiser, who now jams all in for around $4,000, a little more than a min raise. And yeah, this is kind of the problem with vlogging while you play. You know, I'm taking notes, I'm taking video, I'm trying to pay attention to a lot of things at once, and sometimes I miss critical details like stack sizes. Now, of course, if I'd known that he had $4,000 to start the hand, I would not have gotten in there with 9 high, the old re-raise with a suited gapper, but here we are. We're getting a price to call against pretty much any hand, aside from maybe pocket nines. So I got to toss in the chips and hope that we're up against ace king or something like that. Unfortunately, my opponent shows pocket queens. We're running this one once, a little over 8,000 in the middle. Flop comes down jack 8-6 though, so that looks pretty good. We have an open ender. And the turn comes a 5, giving me the stone cold nuts. River is an irrelevant 4 of spades, and just like that, we end up sucking out versus pocket queens. Can't deny that we're running hot today. Pot wasn't too big, but still more than welcome. And I guess this is kind of what happens. You know, you make mistakes by not paying attention, and then you get lucky. Yeah, poker is just unfair sometimes. Anyway, in the next hand, there's an early position open to $500. Middle position makes it $1,500, and I'm looking down at king queen offsuit on the button. Now, the player who made it $1,500, he's been pretty active, and I think he might be trying to go after some of these guys a little bit light. So, whereas normally I would just muck king queen offsuit given this situation, this time I decide to take the aggressive route myself. Try to take control of the hand, make it $3,700 to go. Back to early position who folds, but then the middle position re-raiser makes the call. So we're off to a board of 10-8-4 with one flush draw out there. Not really the best flop for me ever. We don't have much going on aside from 2 overs. So I decided to just check this one back when he checks it to me. Turn card, however, is an ace, which of course, you know, I don't actually connect with, but given the pre-flop action, I could certainly represent it. He checks it again, and instead of betting this card, I decided that I'm gonna bet it on the river. Reason being is I would often check back hands like ace 5 suited or ace 3 suited on this turn. So I feel like, you know, I might pot control with a strong hand from time to time. And I'm going to do the same thing here with king high. Of course, I am not giving up on it by any means, but just delaying the bluff aggression to the next street. We have position, so it's fine to do things like this once in a while. River is an offsuit 5, and my opponent checks it a 3rd time. Well, we've gotten this far. We're not going to check back king high. Plenty of hands we could get folds from that are beating me if I check it back. So I decided to put in one flag, aka the $5,000 chip here in Las Vegas. My opponent does not snap call, so it looks like he does not have an ace. After some time, it looks like he's a bit frustrated with the situation, which is kind of exactly what I was hoping for. You know, try to put him in a tough spot with a single pair type of holding. And it looks like he just cannot come up with enough bluffs. I don't really blame him. I might even go for some value here with hands like kings, queens, or jacks. After some time, my opponent reluctantly folds. So we get this one through. Not the biggest pot of the night, but always nice to steal it with a bluff. In the next hand, there is a middle position raise to $400. And I look down at 6-5 suited of spades this time in the middle blind. And already we have a decision point in this hand. Now, I think a call is more than okay, but once in a while, re-raising from the blinds with hands like these, I think is a good strategy because you just become tougher to play against. And, you know, the times where the board comes down kind of low, it doesn't mean you're always going to be missing it. It's just an all-around good idea to sort of round the strategy. So anyway, this time I decide to do exactly that. Wouldn't always do this. Sometimes call, sometimes re-raise. This time I re-raise. I make it $2,200 to go. Back to the initial raiser in middle position who makes the call, and we go to a flop heads up. This time we're out of position. Comes down king 8-3 with one spade. Not really the worst board ever. I mean, of course, my exact hand doesn't flop much, but given the pre-flop action, I could still have a lot of strong hands, and I'm generally still going to maintain an advantage on this kind of board texture. So I decided to bet small, $1,100. Worth noting, I would do this with all strong hands as well. My opponent makes the call, and we're off to a turn card on which I'm planning to bluff if it's good for me, like, you know, a spade or maybe an ace, a straight draw perhaps, but probably I'll give up if it's a bad card. Unfortunately, it is a bad card. It's the 8 of clubs, pairing the middle card, and this is one that I would almost always check on, even if I did have perhaps even a hand like ace king. So I decided to check it, and my opponent checks it back. Kind of weird. I really expected him to bet this card. River, though, gives us some improvement. It's the 6 of clubs. We have a 6, but given this situation, it doesn't feel super strong. However, if my opponent had a pair, I feel like he would have bet the turn, either for value if it was a king, or for protection if it was, say, a hand like pocket 7s, for example. So I feel like him checking back the turn is usually an indication that he's got some sort of showdown value, but he doesn't really feel comfortable betting it. I guess it could be a pocket pair higher than the 6, but I think more often than not, that's going to indicate ace high. For example, a hand like ace jack or whatever. You guys get the idea. That paired with the fact that I would often bluff this river. Let's say I had a hand like 5-4 suited instead of 6-5 suited. I would probably go for a bluff here, especially after he checks back the turn. So I think we have a very rare opportunity on our hands here to place the old merge bet. Now, if you guys aren't sure what that means, it's essentially betting a weak to medium strength hand as if it was a really strong or bluffy type of hand. And the goal of this is to try to induce a hero call from your opponent, and then you get some super thin value. That's pretty much the gist of it. There's a little more to it, but you guys get the idea. Now, it's worth saying that you should only do this against players who you think are capable of hero calling with not so good hands. If you're up against a guy who's only going to call you with a really strong hand and then just fold out the rest, this is just burning money. But this guy, from what I'd gathered, was a pretty solid player and someone who I think might look me up with ace high. So I decide to put in a bet. I think to myself, how much would I bet if I had a bluff like jack 10 suited or whatever? And the number is 2/3 of the pot size. I throw in $4,400. Math could be a little bit off here, but you know, you guys get the idea. Anyway, I put in $4,400 and we don't get snap called. He doesn't look like he wants to raise either. And perhaps we've got him right where we want him with this bet. After some time, he tosses in a call, and I'm still not super sure if we have the best hand, but I turn it over, and he looks back at his cards before mucking them. Whew, that is exactly the result we were looking for, and we are able to get what I think is probably max value with this rivered pair of sixes. $15,000 pot headed our way, and I'm not gonna lie, this one was a bit of a confidence booster. In the next hand, the straddle is on, and I look down at pocket queens in early position, make it $600 to go. Player in late position puts in the re-raise now, he makes it $1,900. And when it gets back around to me, I know what many of you are thinking. We've got pocket queens. It's time to raise again, right? Well, not so fast. It turns out pocket queens, when you raise them from early position, you're deep stacked and someone else re-raises, they often play quite well as a call. Now, that's not to say you should never re-raise, but this time I decide to just call, kind of under-rep my hand a little bit and keep more options open post-flop. Off to a board which has me kicking myself a little bit. Queen 6-6. Yeah, top full house. Doesn't get any better than this, guys. I check it. Unfortunately, my opponent checks it back, which doesn't seem great to me. But anyway, the turn card is the 4 of clubs. It's time to start betting. Now, if I had a bluff or like a medium strength hand, like a middling pair or something like that, I would bet $1,300, which is around 1/3 of the pot size. So that's what I decide to do with pocket queens. Sometimes your hand is just too strong. You don't even know what to do. You know what I mean? And I was maybe getting a little bit of that here, but I'm happy to see my opponent makes the call, and we're off to a river, which is the 3 of spades, bringing in the flush. Now, what kind of hands are we hoping to get called by if we bet? Well, maybe jacks, pocket 10s, pocket 9s, stuff like that. But aside from that, I don't think anything is going to call. However, if we check, we leave the door open for my opponent to bet, whether that's with a bluff or, of course, what I'm hoping, a flush. There was a flush draw on the flop, so I guess he could have a flush. The thing is, he probably would have bet a flush draw on the flop, which, if you guys remember back to the flop, he did not. He just checked it back. So I don't think he's going to have a flush draw too often, but who knows? Good things can happen if I check here and he bets. So instead of just trying to get a little more value, I go for gusto. Trying to set up the check raise, and luckily it works out. My opponent thinks for a bit and then bets $4,400, a pretty big bet relative to the pot size. And now it's just a question of how much do we want to raise. He's got like 50,000, maybe 40,000 behind, so an all-in is just way too big. But I'm still going to go for a large sizing. After some thought, I make it $19,000 to go. Essentially just thinking to myself, let's say I had a hand like ace 4, maybe like just the ace of spades. I don't know, these kind of random hands that suddenly want to turn into a bluff. How much would I make it? And 19,000 was my magic number. Now my opponent goes into the tank for quite a long time, saying he wishes he checked. It seems like he definitely has something at this point. And he kind of goes back and forth between calling, folding. Eventually, You guys can probably guess what he ends up doing just based on how my night has been going here at the Wynn. Everything seems to be going our way, and this pot is no exception. He makes the call after some time. I turn over the queens and we win. Biggest pot of the night so far, nearly $45,000 going our way. And this hand really couldn't have gone any better. I guess maybe just calling pre-flop ended up getting me paid because I guess he probably didn't expect me to have pocket queens. Either way, this great hand boosts us well into profit land so far. We've got one more hand to go over before wrapping it up. And this last one, the stand-up game is on. I raise it up with Jack Deuce suited to $300. Just desperately trying to give some money back to the game at this point. Middle position makes it $1,100 back around to me, and well, not many better ways to donate than to call with Jack Deuce out of position. So that's exactly what I do. Off to a flop which comes down 9-7 deuce. No heart for me, just bottom pair, which I guess is definitely better than nothing. I check it, he bets $1,200. I make the call. And I'm a little embarrassed about this, but the turn is the Jack of clubs, giving me a pretty disguised 2-pair. I check it again. This time my opponent checks it back. River is the 6 of clubs, and well, I've got a strong hand here. Sure, there are many hands that could technically beat me, but I feel like all of those would have continued betting on the turn. So I'm just going to target over pairs or perhaps a jack here that my opponent could have. I put in $3,300. My opponent thinks for quite some time. And once again, we get paid off. He makes the call. $11,000 pot headed our way. And yeah, when you can't even lose with Jack Deuce, that's how you know you're having a good night. Shortly after, though, it was time to get going. So I racked up and got out of there. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the hand. Stay tuned for some final thoughts.
All right, so that brings a wrap to today's Vegas session. As you guys saw, things went pretty well for myself. I ran really good and never really encountered a tough situation. Anytime that's the case during a poker session, you're gonna have a good night. That's exactly what happened with me. I was in for around 50 or 60,000, maybe a bit more, but ended up winning around that same amount. I don't know exactly how much. As always, you guys will see the results right here. I've actually got a friend with me right now, Mr. Rampage Poker. He tagged along for the last couple of hours. I don't think he was interested in playing. He just kind of hung out. Just got some good news during the session, actually, that our band got contracted to play our first ever live show. I'm gonna have a link for tickets. It'll either be here or next video. I'm not sure if we have that set up yet, but it is in Southern California at a location called the Viper Room. There's gonna be limited tickets. I think the whole room holds like 200 or 300 people. I think also that this guy is going to be there. I'm trying to make him come out. You know, he's busy all the time, but we'll get him there. So yeah, if you guys want to watch me play the drums, you want to watch some live music, I'll have some updates for that real soon. Yeah, you could do this all night if you come. Anyway, that's it for tonight, guys. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for the support, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, peace.